This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with Chris Mullineux, who is joining us all the way from South Africa. How are you today, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. Very, very good. Good to be here.
Now, we spoke a couple of years ago with your wife and did a kind of interesting back alley interview about your house and its marvellous wines. But today we're going to be doing a 101 on Chenin Blanc. We had a tasting with you yesterday, and Chenin Blanc is obviously a grape that's very close to your heart.
Yeah.
And I think I think when people think of South African Chenin Blanc, they perhaps don't really understand how fantastic it can be, because I think there have been too many bad examples in our market for decades now.
Yeah.
But what is it that you find so interesting about the Chenin Blanc varietal?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. It's a variety that's very versatile. It can do many, many different styles. And I think that's maybe one of the problems in the past, is that people made many, many different types of Chenin. And they, especially in South Africa, Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay have been very, very fashionable historically. And people have kind of taken Chenin and tried to make it taste like Sauvignon or make it taste like Chardonnay. So pick it really early when it's still green and super acidic, so it's like grassy and tart. Or pick it really ripe and use new wood, and even sometimes leave a bit of sugar so that it's mimicking Chardonnay or even Loire styles of Chenin. But more recently, our producers are getting more confident in making South African styles of Chenin. So not trying to imitate another country or another variety, but just trying to make authentically honest, pure, transparent Chenin Blanc that tastes like the place where it grows. And that's very exciting, I think, at the moment.
When was Chenin Blanc first planted in South Africa?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the exact date is not sure, but it was in the sort of 1650s when it was brought. So more than 350 years ago, it was brought to South Africa. Yeah, so it's a hell of a long time. And over the last few hundred years, what's happened is the local farmers have, in their vineyards, when they want to replace a vineyard, they'll go and find the vines that have performed best and take cuttings from them, and then use those to replant new vineyards. So over those years and centuries, we've developed our own clones of Chenin that are unique to South Africa and have kind of evolved and adapted to become happy in our growing conditions. Because obviously we've got different soils, different weather to what they have in France. So yeah, there's a long history, and we've got our own material in South Africa, which is also special, I think.
So there is a fair bit of clonal variation across the different regions in South Africa.
A little bit across the regions in terms of clones. The main thing is, in South Africa, you can go a very short distance, and the terroir changes a lot. So if you go from Swartland, for instance, to Stellenbosch, it's just an hour. So it's 80 kilometers, but the climate changes dramatically. The soils change dramatically as well. So clones are spread out quite a lot. We do have a few different clones, but the climate and the soil changes a lot in a very short distance in South Africa. Yeah.
And how does Chenin Blanc perform in the vineyard?
Well, it's actually an amazing grape, because it's if you think of Loire Chenin, it's a grape that has a lot of acidity. It's one of the white varieties that has a hell of a lot of acid, and that's why often Loire Chenin Blancs have a bit of sugar, because the winemakers have to leave a bit of residual sugar to sort of soften all the acid over. But where we are, where it's a bit warmer and drier, the acid is lower. So for us to leave sugar in the wine is actually not ideal. It's actually better to have dry styles of Chenin. But having said that, you can pick Chenin ripe. We can pick it. We don't have to pick it early. We can pick it when the grapes are properly ripe, when those green flavors have kind of disappeared, and it still has a really good acidity. So although it's technically a cool climate grape, it does well in a warm place like South Africa.
Now, you mentioned yesterday during our tasting that the South Africans have, through the use of various yeast and picking times, tried to make their Chenin Blanc taste like Sauvignon Blanc, which you said was like that love of Sauvignon Blanc was like a disease.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's still, we call it swimming pool wine. It's what people drink by the swimming pool, but it also tastes like swimming pool water. It's like this. It's this insipid, light, nothing wine.
Have you ever been guilty of making such a wine?
I hope not.
Okay.
No, we've never made Sauvignon Blanc, so yeah. But I've got nothing against it, but it's not. Yeah, it's not close to my heart, so yeah, we don't go for that.
Now, something that I find quite fascinating is the age of some of the Chenin Blanc vines.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we obviously, having had the variety in the country for 350 years, it lends itself to having many old vineyards. The nice thing also is our climate being warm and dry. There's not a lot of esca or diseases like that kill vineyards. So we have many vineyards that are 40, 50, 60 plus years old. And Chenin was in the sort of mid 1900s in South Africa extremely popular for big volume wines.
Right, for bulk wines.
So there was a lot of Chenin Blanc planted, and a lot of it was planted in very sort of fertile, vigorous soils. So obviously when the vines were young, the wines were quite lean and light and maybe a bit thinner. But now that the vines are older, they're in their 50s, 40s and 50s, the vines have slowed down, the crops are lower, and there's a lot of interesting concentration. So yeah, we have sort of these old bulk wine producers to thank for planting all these vineyards that we use now in the wines.
I find that quite humorous with some of the better Chenin Blancs coming from these old bulk wine vineyards.
No, for sure. Well, I mean, our top Chenins, the Granite Chenin, the Court Chenin, were all planted in the 60s and 70s for these bulk wines. So thanks to those guys.
Now, with the love of Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, have many of these vineyards, the older Chenin vineyards, been uprooted and planted over to Chardonnay?
I mean, that's for sure happened. So in the sort of 70s and early 80s, Chenin was probably 45% of all our vineyards in South Africa, and that's come down a lot now. So it's probably 15 or 16% of all the vineyards in South Africa are Chenin. But it's now actually stopped. People aren't really ripping out Chenin anymore. So we're looking after the vineyards that are there and actually planting Chenin again. So that sort of trend of a reduction in the Chenin plantings is reversing again. So that's great. It's kind of become our signature white variety. People, there are lots of white varieties planted, but people don't realize that we've got more Chenin planted in South Africa than in the whole of France. So it's a grape that's really synonymous with our country and it's adapted to our climate, adapted to our soils, so it's at home where we are. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that many winemakers are now having the confidence to produce what is a true South African Chenin style. What does that mean in your mind, a truly South African Chenin?
So if you go back to obviously Loire versions of Chenin, as I was saying just now, often the wines are, they have a lot of acidity. You're talking sort of 8-9 grams a litre of acid. So the wines, if they're dry, are really angular, really hard. And that's why the wineries will often leave a little bit of sugar just to soften them off. In South Africa, we don't have that. The acid will be maybe 6.5 grams a litre. So it's just it's a lovely fresh style of Chenin, but we don't need to leave sugar. So the best wines are bone dry, but they're not light, they're not thin. They have this wonderful texture, this almost sort of creamy textural mid palate that goes with the freshness, and that's not texture from alcohol. It's not texture that you need to use wood or new wood on the wine. It's texture from old vines, from dry climate. That means you have small bunches, low yields that give a lot of fruit intensity. So it's sort of a combination of this wonderful texture with freshness. So almost, if you were to take a nice Sauvignon Blanc and blend it with a nice Chardonnay, you end up with an amazing Chenin. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how does the Chenin Blanc varietal interpret the soil that it's planted in?
Yeah, well, it's very versatile. So you can, like I was saying, one of the strengths of Chenin is it is very versatile, and you can make really lean, fresh styles, and you can make super rich, powerful styles as well. And a lot of that depends on where it's growing. So if it's in very deep, sandy, fertile soils, it tends to be a little bit fresher, a little bit tighter, and a bit more delicate. And if you plant it in more sort of heavier, stonier, rockier soils, the vines tend to be smaller, the yields smaller, the bunches smaller with very thick skins in the grapes. So you get more sort of structure, almost phenolic characters in the wine. And the flavors will be different as well. So in vigorous, more sandy soils, you get more shade growing on in the vines. So you get more sort of citrus aromatics, and then in the sort of rockier, more sort of difficult soils, you get more sun shining on the grapes. So you get more stone fruit. You can get apricots, those kind of aromatics. So yeah, a lot of it just has to do with how much water is available for the vines, and then that influences how they grow. So,
superb. Well, that's a fantastic Chenin Blanc 101 you've just given me today.
all good.
I appreciate your time, and thanks for popping round to my home to film this today.
Jamie. Yeah, good to be here.
We'll speak to you soon, I hope. Bye for now.
Thank you.